I'm business advisor in the mid-markets and corporates team at Odoo, and I mainly take care of the German-speaking market.
Hi, my name is Nico Esposito. I also work as a business advisor at Odoo, also in the mid-market and corporate department, and I focus mainly on Dutch, French, and English clients. Now, we're here today because through our time working with these mid-market and corporate, somewhat larger companies, we've seen that they have a lot of trouble organizing their service activities as their company becomes bigger. So today we really wanted to dive into that a little bit and see how we can make their life easier with Odoo V15. But before we do that, John, what do we need to discuss first?
Actually, before we dig into Odoo 15, we have to start from the beginning and analyze the challenges that companies face today. So, mainly big corporates have a big issue with integration. As companies grow, so do the number of systems and the complexity of the features that they implement. Okay, as a small company could maybe discuss around a water cooler, big corporates need a chat system. And the problem is that every system comes with its own access, learning curve, uh, license price, and maintenance. And on top of that, all these systems, in order to work efficiently, need to be integrated with each other. And if left unmanaged, we see that in the end, like we see on this image, it becomes an untangled mess of communications between the system not working properly. Okay. Talking about exchanges at the water cooler, communication is another important challenge for companies. As emails get lost throughout the information, and many companies face the difficulty of having information centralized in one system. I mean, look at yourself. How many times did you try to find specific data, specific information that, again, was part of an email or specific within a specific system? So it is very important and a second challenge for companies.
Well, John, I have to say, I work at Odoo, so I don't have a problem with communication because everything with us is nicely centralized. But I see what you mean. The third challenge is that each company thinks they're unique. This is something that humans do as well. As you grow, they will develop their own internal processes and they'll become convinced that these are very specific and they can't possibly fit into a standard solution, which is, of course, not the case. But finding this balance between a standard ERP solution and the very specific needs of a company is another one of the challenges that we see that these firms face, where they have to make a trade off between suboptimal standard solutions or tailor made, custom, and very expensive developments. The final challenge that a company faces today is that as it grows and wants to be technologically nimble and make use of the advancements that we've made in cloud computing, artificial intelligence, and all these other fascinating technologies, they're blocked by the fact that most of their systems might still run on a mainframe that's 20 or 30 years old. So there's really nothing they can do with those systems, which is really the fourth main challenge. Now, one thing that's interesting in terms of trends is that 36% of these companies have accelerated their digital transformation plans as a result of COVID. So they felt the need to really increase their digital transformation, but they encounter some problems. What's another thing we've noticed, John?
Well, Nico, let's talk about it. I mean, let's face it, 84% of the companies we are talking about today actually already have a full working ERP system in place. So here, the challenge is, of course, for you, but also for us, as Odoo will challenge the status quo of the companies as we go along. But in the end, Nico, tell me, I mean, what actually makes up a traditional ERP? Let's talk about it. I mean, most of the traditional ERPs are hard to set up. It's difficult. I talked about entanglement of integrations. Most of them are not really user friendly. So all these leads to unhappy users, and furthermore, the extremely expensive part during the implementation. Nobody likes that.
Well, you make it sound like ERPs are horrible, which is, of course, not the case, because if we take a look at what defines Odoo, we really see four key principles. The first is that Odoo is fully integrated. That's maybe the key advantage of Odoo is that all your apps and your business needs are solved in one platform, which means that there's no need for integration if everything is already on the same platform. Now, coupled with that is a second principle, which is just as important, and that's that we're fully featured. It doesn't make sense to offer you an integrated platform when 80% of what you do has to be solved using other applications. So we've built these applications to ensure that you can manage your entire business from within the Odoo platform. The third part is scalability, right? When you're changing an ERP, you might think, okay, the accounting system has to go. It doesn't work anymore, but we don't really have an immediate problem with the sales. So we'd like to start with accounting. And most ERPs will tell you, well, you either take it all or you take nothing. That's not the case with Odoo. With Odoo, you can start with accounting, we'll implement it, we'll get it up and running, and then when you feel ready to take the next step and you've done the necessary change management, we can start implementing these additional apps and modules to ensure that you'll have your complete ERP system at a rate which works for you. The final one is intuitiveness. At Odoo, we place user experience front and center, which means that we always develop thinking, does this make the life of a user easier or not? So really, just to reiterate, integration is key. Now, John, I think it's just about time that we start delving into Odoo 15 and that we talk a little bit about all these features that these companies can actually use for their service activities.
Nico, that's so true. But of course, first we have to talk about reporting itself. I mean, before we go into the V15 and the details of, for example, the spreadsheet, which I will talk about, let's dig deeper into actually the reporting itself. Reporting is crucial for any given company for taking strategic decision. Okay, with Odoo, spreadsheet and dashboards, you have data which is centralized, which is right there to grab on, and off you go to take the decisions that you need on a daily basis, but even on a long term.
So, John, I'm willing to believe that this really is working a lot better than before and that spreadsheets are great, but how about you just show it a little bit instead of talking about it? How does that sound?
Nico, of course, let's go right in it. So, what we see right now here is a typical dashboard inside of Odoo, where we see the different apps having their individual features, but as they are integrated with each other, the information and the data is linked with each other. So, let's take a realistic case here. And I want to know for my clients, what is the percentage that my clients actually um, add to my total of my sales, let's say on a weekly basis, so that I can take my decisions on a weekly basis. So for that, let's start off by creating a simple pivot table. Okay, so I go into my sales, I go into, of course, my reporting of my sales, and off we go in our pivot view. Okay, what I will do now is to say, okay, what are the customers to which I have sold my products, but also the time frame, okay, which I want my data to be in. So here, of course, you're flexible. You can do it on a monthly, quarterly basis, but let's keep it on a weekly basis for this example and start off with the weekly data. Okay, as we could just, as the pivot right here is just an assembly of the data, and I actually want to work with it, let's insert this data into the Odoo spreadsheet. Okay, you see it's a very simple process. Bam, here we go, off we go. Now, right now, I can work with this data. I'm flexible. If needed, I can um, even export this into Excel. Okay, so we mentioned the fact that we wanted to know what is the percentage that my client actually contributes to my total sales. Okay, so what I will do is to say, okay, I have my client here, Deco Addict, okay, who in this case, um, will contribute to my total sales. Okay. Sorry for that. It's a little keyboard issue. Of course, we are here in Belgium, so we have to adapt to the local keyboards, but that's not an issue as Odoo stays flexible on that regards. Okay, so here we say we want to have, again, I come back to my deco addict and say I want to divide this by the total, of course. Okay, in order to have this percentage, which I will define right now, follow up for all my clients, obviously I will need to define, as we know it in classical spreadsheets, define this with a dollar sign. Okay, from there on, I can very easily drag this throughout my spreadsheet. And here we have the percentages given. Okay. Of course, what I can do at any given point in time is to say, I want to know where is my data even coming from. So right now, I could say, okay, I want to know from these nearly $9,000 the source inside of Odoo. So I can right click it and click on see records, and Odoo will redirect me to all the sales that have given me this total. Okay, so this is a really cool feature and gives you a good overview on the sales in this case. Okay, so next, of course, I want to have it a little bit more crunchy. Just data is very dry. I want to insert a graph view on this. Okay, so for this, what I will do is insert a chart. Okay, and say my data ranges from here. I mentioned them are already given, and from here I have my categories, which are the given names that I have here. So I will define my names for my clients. Okay, and I decide, okay, a bar chart is not enough. I prefer a pie chart. Yeah, it's personal. That's what I like. And right now, what I have here is the representation of the sales of my clients. Okay, so next to this, next to my pie chart, which I just created, of course, we have our friend Nico, who is not part of the room right now, but likes to add something to this data. For example, saying, hey, John, this graph isn't correct right now. So he can make changes directly to my pie chart in order to correct it. And me at the same time, of course, what I could do is seeing that he's including some random messages in my spreadsheet is to use the really cool find and replace feature. Okay, it enables me to find a specific text in my spreadsheet and replace it. In this case, I want to delete it because I don't like it. Okay, so in the meantime that I've been playing around with his field, well, Nico was very polite and very nice to adapt my pie chart in order for it to work properly. Okay, so now we have our pie chart right here. Okay, so it's a really cool function. Multi-collaboration on the Odoo spreadsheet is really awesome. So, of course, while we work on it and Odoo constantly updates itself in the backend, at some point we want to work with fresh data. So at any given time and moment, we can refresh the data inside of Odoo in order to be sure to work with current data. Okay. So now that we've seen all these awesome features right now in the spreadsheet, of course, what we will find is the spreadsheet within the documents application. So at any given time, I could find my spreadsheet right here. And I see Nico is still working on it. By the way, Nico, you're so busy working on stuff. What else do you have us to show?
Well, I've been working a bit on projects in the meantime, actually. Let me just get into that right now. So our project application has actually gotten even better, right? Companies especially larger companies, have some pretty complex project management, and they were able to do this in Odoo even in V14. But we've added a couple of features in V15 that make it even easier to work on complex projects in Odoo. So let's take a look at that right now. So we're still on the same Odoo database, and we'll take a look at projects. Now, first thing you'll notice, what we didn't have before, is that we now have project stages in a very similar way that we had to task stages, which allows you to group projects maybe by department or by status, which becomes especially important as the number of projects increases. Another thing we've done is that when you're doing a project, you'll often notice that you can't do every task whenever you want, right? There's just some things that have to happen before other tasks can be completed. Let's take this example of an office renovation that we worked on, right? So we were doing the office renovation. We first had to remove and strip everything. So let's take a look at how we organized this in the Gantt view. So we'll just go a bit back because this was a while ago, right? We're thinking around August 2021. So I'll just do that here. And we can see here that we had 4 tasks, namely removing the furniture, stripping the walls, removing the electrical wiring, and then finally removing the tiles, right? That was everything we needed to do to make sure that the furniture and the office was ready for the renovation. So you can see these little arrows here that are actually already indicating that we have some task dependencies, but this one's not right currently, because if we start stripping the walls and we haven't removed the furniture yet, well, that's just going to get messy. So from within the Gantt view, we can very easily click on this task and we can say, hey, this task is going to be blocked by the fact that we have to remove the walls. And now this is a bit confusing to me, so I'll say I want this grouped by the project. I can see, okay, these are all my office renovation tasks, and I'm going to say this is blocked by the furniture removal. So let's select that one. Let's save, and as you can see, the arrow has been added. If at some point we say, actually this isn't a dependency, just a simple click of the button will take it away. Now this Gantt view is also handy in general if you want to say, okay, stripping the walls, maybe we'll do that a day earlier, right? Get done before the weekend and actually have a free weekend. So that's something very nice that you can do very easily from within the Gantt view. And if you say, well, we're going to have more work, we're going to have to do something else, maybe clean asbestos, right? Very important to get that out of the way before we start working on the renovations. And I'm allergic to asbestos, so I'm going to ask John to do that. So I've assigned John to this task, right? And this is going to be blocked by, let's see here, what do we need to finish before we can remove the asbestos? I think it's going to be removing the tiles, right? So we'll remove the tiles, then we'll do the asbestos. Let's save and close. And now we can see that actually this task has been added. We're not going to do that the same day, so I'm going to say this is going to start on the 16th. And as you can see, everything was updated in the project. All the tasks are updated as well. Another thing I want to get into is burn down charts. This is from Agile methodology, where you want to keep track of how many tasks you're adding and how many tasks you're completing, and is commonly used to track the progress of Agile projects. We can see here at the start, we had 1 task in progress, 1 which was done, and then in September, we can see that there's a whole new list of tasks which are in progress, 2 which are done, and 2 which are new. So we'll be able to see that burn down chart very visually to see where we're at project-wise. Now, in addition to that, one of the key features that we've been able to add is milestones. We already had them, but now we actually have a separate project update and milestone option, which allows you to add distinct milestones to your project, maybe because you're billing in a milestone-based fashion and you'll only get your money if you hit your milestone. So it's best if you define it clearly upfront. When you're working on complex projects, what you didn't have before and what you have now with updates is a way to track in a sort of general way, how is the project going? And we can do this very easily with project updates. So if I create a project update here, I'll say update 5. Automatically, Odoo will say, is the status on track? What's the progress? How many tasks are open? How many were created? Any milestones we closed and added? The profitability and all the people that worked on it. And then, of course, this is a text field, so we can add whatever we want. But Odoo has taken a bit of the work out for us and added all this data which we think are relevant. And then you can add on the that. So that's projects, right? Let's recap that very quickly. Basically, we have a project overview, we've got burn down charts, we've got updates and milestones, dependent tasks, and we can now even share our projects with externals, both in read-only mode as well as editable. So a host of new features, but John, we're not only known for our products, are we?
Of course not, Nico. We differentiate ourselves in many ways. But also, one important aspect is our implementation methodology, where Odoo will push as standard features as possible in order to deliver as quickly and as affordable for the client as possible. That is important to us, and that is what the client wants, and that is what we will always go to.
Well, John, that's all well and good, but do you have any proof that these principles and methodologies actually even work?
Well, Nico, of course. Otherwise, we would be standing here. I mean, of course, let's have a quick look at some of our references.
Wow, these are some pretty big names. Are you telling me that when I eat a Danone and I drive around in my car, that's thanks to Odoo?
Nico, I'm telling you, then when you drink a Danone or you drive a Volkswagen, then think of Odoo, that's for sure.
Well, I'll definitely be doing that. John, is there anything else you want to say to the audience before we close things down here?
Well, of course, have fun during the Odoo XP and stay safe.
Yes, guys, don't drink and drive. If you want to be in touch with us, you'll have our contact details just here on the presentation slides and will of course also be available for a short Q&A. We hope you enjoyed this talk and have a great Odoo experience. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you and goodbye. So, that was a great and interesting talk that we had right now. And now we're off to the question session right now here with Nico and myself, of course. And since we're broadening internationally, let's go right on to the questions.
Yeah, I see we have a lot of participants from Mexico. So, hola, buenas tardes. Nice to have you here. If I look at the first question in the chat, we have a question from Rocker Mining asking, what is Office using Odoo 15? If Odoo is used in Microsoft 365, then do I have to register an account in Office? So I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that question, but I think you're talking about whether or not you have to have a link between your Microsoft account and your Odoo account. And the answer is you don't. Even if you're running on an Office 365 environment, it's perfectly possible to be connected to your Odoo database, for example, with your personal email. But what will happen commonly is that when you're joining Odoo as a platform in a company and you're already working on Office 365, is that you'll use your Outlook email to connect to Odoo. So in some way, your Office account will be linked to Odoo, and we can even simplify the authentication by only asking that you log in with your Windows account to have access to your Odoo database, but it's not a requirement per se.
Awesome.
Other than that, John, can you maybe take a look at some of the other questions for me?
Yeah, sure. Let's go right ahead. Another question would be about sharing projects with my customers. How would you do that?
Coming in from Mario. Well, we went over it very quickly when we looked at the projects application, but what you couldn't do in V14 is actually give a portal user, so someone who doesn't have an Odoo license, access to the projects. And we've changed that in a couple of ways. So you can now share a project in two ways. The first is that you can share a project in read-only, right? And this works much similarly to how you would share documents, where the person who has access to the document can only read what has already been written inside the project. So he can review the planning, he can maybe take a look at the timesheets, look at the chatter log, and see where the project is at right now. But on the other hand, what you can also do is share a project in an editable format. And what that means is that someone who is not on the Odoo database will also have the possibility of editing the project state, maybe by adding timesheets to a task or by adding a description to a task, logging something as a note. So in that way, you can basically collaborate almost completely with people outside your organization in the same project. And I see that Eduardo said that everything was very clear and he has no questions. That's very nice.
That's
Eduardo.
great for him. But
we appreciate that.
Since we do have more questions to talk about, I mean, it's very important to discuss them all. I have another question for you, Nico. Would be the question if I actually can have more than one person that is responsible for a task, for example. I mean, you talked about it, but you didn't go into detail.
Well, that's true. That's true because we have so much interesting content to cover. Obviously, we can't cover everything immediately. But what wasn't possible in V13 was to say I will have multiple people working on a task. that was not an option. Now in V15, however, you can assign as many people as you want to a task. So if you're afraid that a task isn't going to get completed by one person, just assign multiple people to it, right? And at least one of them will get the job done. I think that's really what we try to do with the upgrades for project in V15.
Amazing, amazing. And another feature that you mentioned was the burn down chart.
The burn down chart, yeah. So mainly used in agile development. What this burn down chart will do is more of an approximation of really the burn down chart that you'll see in agile development, where it will take the number of tasks opened, completed, and ongoing at a given point in time, and then for various points in time, it'll basically register, okay, at this point in time, how many of those tasks were completed, how many more questions were added. And in that sense, we'll get a good overview of how the amount of tasks is progressing. Are we completing all of them? Are we adding a lot of them? And based on that, again, in agile methodology, you would use that to maybe revise the amount of points that you attribute to user stories to ensure that your development can basically follow the planning.
Great. I hope you could visualize it as much as I could with Nico explaining it. Another question, actually, which we would like to talk about is talking about the features we talked about today.
Mm-hmm.
Is it exclusive for service companies or can it apply also to other types of companies?
I mean, it's 2021, so you can really do whatever you want and no one will judge you for it. But it is true that it makes more sense to use projects and spreadsheets and similar features in service companies. But you can imagine, for example, that a very entrepreneurial restaurant keeper will use the spreadsheet app to track what is coming out of his point of sales and use that to see, okay, maybe I'm spending too much on ingredients that aren't consumed and I have to throw them away. And he can basically centralize all of that in his documents app. So it's definitely not exclusive to service companies.
Wow, great. I think we talked about a lot today and it was an amazing talk. So thank you so much for tuning in. And again, as we mentioned just before, stay safe, don't drink and drive, and do all the rest that Nico told before. I mean, just stay safe.
Be cool and stay in school.
Don't hesitate to contact us.
Thank you guys and good night.